I'd like to note for all of us, we're 4 months into this. 4 months in, and we don't have one agreed-on solution yet. Not one agreed-on path from either side of where we're going. And for 4 months, we got 6 months left to come up with something by legislation that we're going to have to agree that we have a crisis in our hands. I've got United Mine Workers, my state, and so many people in my state, and a very small pension that it'll destroy people's lives. And I don't know what the progress has been made by staff on both sides, if we have agreements or disagreements. I'd like to know that. So hopefully by our next meeting, Mr. Chairman, we can get a status on the staffs if we had agreement, any type of movement forward. There's been a lot of good information come out. Congressman Norcross came across the bankruptcy. I'm very much concerned about that. You've got to fix the problem. Anytime you put a financial institution in front of a human being, you got a problem. And that's what's been happening for far too long. We're talking about putting undue burden on businesses. We don't want to do that. We just gave the greatest tax cut in the history of the United States of America. The greatest tax cut we've ever given. You can sit here and debate it all day long, too much, not enough, whatever. But everyone got a benefit from that except the working people. And now we're afraid that we're adding a little bit more of a premium, and the premium's not going to solve my miner's problem. The premium right now, short-term premium, is not going to fix what I've got facing in a few years. We need to know how we can do this, and the only way you're going to be able to do it is be able to have a loan program. There is no other way of infusion of cash that can keep us from this crisis. So my question to you would be, compare this crisis that we're going to be facing with what happened in 2008 when we bailed everybody out. On what scale would you say that we have looming between our mid-state states pension and the miners' pension? Miners hit first. And if the miners hit first and we don't do something, what does it do towards your PBGC, and how quick does that start accelerating to your 2025?
That is the main accelerator to 2025.
So the UMWA, if we don't fix that one first, we had a fix for this. You understand? We were using AML money. That's coal money. That's every ton of coal we mine. There's a fund we pay into abandoned mine land. And they have taken that and used it for everything but what it's supposed to be used for. That's the problem we have. We can't get legislators to look at how do we fix a problem and do it with money that we're generating from products that we're selling. And now we're not looking for a bailout, but if, as Senator Heitkamp had mentioned, if we're able to come to the aid of every corporation that has an effect on the economy of this country, surely to God we can come to the aid and help of the people who made the country. That's what we're talking about. So we need some suggestions. Every time I ask somebody that comes and sits where you're sitting, help us, because we've got to have some things that we're either going to put on the table. And I think the public needs to know what we agree and don't agree, because this is a bipartisan challenge. It's going to take a bipartisan solution. And right now, we've got nowhere except having great information and testimony. So if you're recommending that we have to have an infusion of cash or we need a borrowing, the only thing I can see is going to help us right now if we have a borrowing, the same as we did with the banks, a bailout. They paid it back. We're going to pay it back. And we have corporations now that can afford to pay a little bit more, I'm sure. If you look at the bottom line, what we were able to do with this last tax cut. Do you think that's feasible and if it's realistic?
Well, we've been working hard, and we've been working with staff. I think we've all identified the dials. Congressman Schweikert may have another one, but we're the dials that can be turned, but we don't have suggestions as to where they should be turned. We can help you analyze.
You know how much cash it's going to take.
Yes, sir.
Well, how much cash is going to take to keep the United Mine Workers of America from going down the tube in 2022? We're about $3.5 billion is what last time we looked. We were about $2 billion and we could have fixed it. Couldn't get it on the bill. They separated that out from the health care, which was absolutely horrific what was done. This would have been over. We'd have had that behind us and worked towards our mid-state pension. We could have, I think, had a pathway forward. So what we need to know is how much money is it going to take to keep the miners from going down the tube, to keep the mid-state from rolling up into one of the greatest calamities that we've had. Have you all evaluated the crisis that we have coming?
We have.
Is it as great as the 208 collapse?
I'm not an expert of the 208 collapse, but it's bound to be, there's bound to be some comparison. I don't know what. the comparison-
What part of, how big of the economy, if, you know, can you help answer these questions if I would ask them?
Well, we know the number of participants that will be affected, but as has been pointed out here, the contagion of the effect on those participants is a lot broader. It's their families and their communities and to some degree, the whole country.
Well, we got 6 months left. We've got to have a piece of legislation go to the floor. And I'm determined to get a piece of legislation that fixes it. Bankruptcy, you got to fix bankruptcy from repeating itself. The human being should be at least equal to the financial institution when it comes to divvying up what's left when a bankruptcy happens. When there's an intentional bankruptcy and we have diversion going into different companies, we should be able to reach back. There should be a clawback provision in bankruptcy that allows us to keep the individual, the human being, whole. And if the premiums have to be increased from the businesses, we want to make sure we don't put them in a hardship. But if we've given the greatest tax cuts in the history of this country, we could think we could negotiate something that it wouldn't be hardship to them. This is all reasonable, but someone's got to tell us how much cash is going to take, where we're going to get it, what's the payback, and we got to start fixing some problems here. I'm willing to start voting on fixing a problem. If we have a discrepancy, then we have to sit down, work through that. But my goodness, we have, I think, the examples have been given here of what we've been able to do when we hit a crisis. I guess we're going to wait till 2022, and then I got to look at the miners and say, okay, we're here, guys. I got, most of these are retired widows is what I'm dealing with. $595. And you take that away, they got nothing. They cannot make it. So we're not talking about a windfall. We're talking about survival. And all I'm asking for is a compassion, but we're going to need some help. We need some answers. And you know, you got the expertise, and we appreciate it. We need you now to lay it on the table. Tell us what we have to have, and we'll figure out how to make it happen.
We can give you those numbers.
Thank you. If you'll do that by our next meeting, and if we can have some direction, Mr. Chairman, of what we want to start making some decisions on, I'd appreciate that very much, because I got to know if there's a difference that we have from one side to the other. Let's find out how and I think the public needs to know. They can't wait until November and say, okay, we've come to an impasse. I want to make sure we
Can I make
start.
one
Yes,
point
please.
on the mine workers? And that is, I understand that the discussion about premiums, and I understand the disagreement about premiums, but an infusion to keep PBGC afloat will have a very positive effect on mine workers, retirees, and beneficiaries.
What I'm saying is that premium will not save me by 2022.
Well, but it'll save your participants. It'll save most of your participants.
Keep them whole?
No, it won't.
I know that. I'm just saying.
Okay.
I'm only talking $595. You take me down to $100, $200. I've still, these people are destroyed. I can't let that happen. But I'm saying I need to know what it does and what extra cash we're going to take, or a loan or AML money or somehow, and then we have to repay that. That's what we're asking for. We're not asking for a handout. We're not asking for a bailout. We're asking for a bridge to get us from point A to B, which we've done in so many instances in this country.
We can tell you how the dials calibrate, but we can't tell you which ones.
By our next meeting, then, hopefully we'll have some answers, and hopefully, Mr. Chairman, we'll be able to start looking at our differences or coming to an agreement and moving a piece of legislation forward.